You're listening to the Today's Wills and Probate podcast, one of the leading sources of information for the wills and probate sector. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todayswillsandprobate.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Wills and Probate podcast. Today we are talking with Andrew Houston, Managing Director of CTT Group. No doubt, Andrew, we'll go into a little bit of your background and your working history, but the topic of conversation today is the future. We're looking at what the next year, 5 years, perhaps even 10 years might look like for estate planning and will writing. CTT, of course, are a business really at the very heart of that. You're a very technology driven organization, so really interested to hear about the direction of travel for your business as well over the course of the next few years. Thanks so much for joining the podcast.
No, great to be here, David. Thank you for inviting me.
We're chatting just before Christmas, and we were saying before we started recording, it is almost a year to the day that CTT lost one of its founding directors, Clive Ponder. Sadly passed away, had a very short battle with cancer. He still looms very large in the business. There's no doubt about it, and indeed in the industry. Clive was really a larger than life character and a massive supporter of today's wills and probate as well. So I guess sort of stepping into his shoes in the sense that you're now very much leading the CTT business, they were some fairly sizable shoes to fill.
They certainly were. Look, I mean, it's tragic, obviously, Clive's passing just over a year ago. But I'd like to think that his spirit lives on, certainly within Gables House. For those of you who have visited us, you'll see a great big picture on the wall which talks about the history of the company, and Clive's depicted in that. And for many people that worked with him for a long period of time or have known him, he was a unique character. So you can't replace a Clive. But yeah, his beliefs and his certain innovation continue in the way that we're going about business. But yeah, it's been a time to reflect, and it's been 12 months. So he will be a person that we remembered for a very, very, very long time.
Oh, no two ways about it. And to your point, an innovator, but famously never wrote a word of code, which is fascinating from a technology business's point of view. Let's get on to that. But in the first instance, tell us about yourself, because you've got a really interesting background as well, Andrew.
Well, glad you think it's interesting. Yeah, I suppose I spent 38 years in private client work. So 32 of those in the wealth management space, and most of that also with Barclays Wealth. And then obviously now 6 years in the legal services arena. So private client is the common theme, and I suppose attached to that, I also played amateur and professional rugby. And I think it's actually a lot of your experiences in all walks of life that help shape you as a leader, and how you go about thinking about the strategy for a business, and also how importantly you manage a business.
If this were a sports podcast, we'd be well into the dynamics of sports and will writing, but let's focus on the business and the technology piece. We've had a momentous year in wills and probate in 2025. If you think about the Law Commission's work on modernising will writing and the very sort of start, I suppose, of what conceptually some of that technology might look like. Let's start with some stargazing. What do you think 2026 will bring in terms of wills, trusts, tax, estate planning, that kind of thing? I mean, there was a lot of talk in the run-up to the budget, of course, about that. Have you seen that sort of manifest in the weeks and months after?
We start at a macro level. I mean, there is huge demand for advice in this particular sector. And if we look at what's happening in the economy, industries are struggling to find growth. There is enormous growth, driven by a number of factors that most people are aware of, an aging population, a huge wealth transfer that's going to be taking place over the next number of years, passing wealth down to other generations. You've got the complexities associated with understanding a legislative framework, taxation. There's also sort of assets that may be, from a financial services perspective. And then you've got another dimension, which, I've got a blended family. So all of those things, along with, obviously, the recent budget, which didn't bring any further increase in allowances for people, means that more and more people are going to be needing these services. So I think you start at an industry level. That's a pretty fantastic place because there's a lot of opportunity for everybody. So I suppose that's I suppose the very, very high level. I see there's a shift probably away from transactional business. So it's no longer, I see, when you see meeting a client, they want help in building a plan. So it's not necessarily just a will. It's actually thinking about planning for that future. So that might be an aspect of death planning, it might be lifetime planning. But those plans, need to be reviewed on a regular basis. If I think back to my days as an advisor in the wealth management space, clients' circumstances changed probably every 3 years. Through sometimes, an inheritance, through death, through marriage, through birth of a child. And so constantly reviewing in terms of one's plan to make sure it's fit for purpose based upon our lives are constantly changing is really important. So I think one of the things we'll see a gradual shift away from is, a solution for one thing to an actually ongoing service.
That's certainly something that I would ascribe to, a view that I would ascribe to. I think, when you talk about will writing as an example, you're talking about, okay, what happens to your assets when you die? Whereas more and more people should be thinking about, well, what are we doing with them while we're alive? And I guess it really is kind of the role of organizations like yourselves to prompt that conversation more, because you'll get plenty of inquiries about, well, I think I need a will, but actually you should then be saying to them, well, that's fine, but let's also deal with what's happening in your life right now.
And I think there's another sort of slight dimension to it. Most private clients, if they're trying to solve for something, they'll need probably 2 or 3 angles to the problem they're trying to solve. Quite often, you need somebody who understands maybe the legal framework at a particular time and actually what one can do sensibly in terms of planning. You have to understand the taxation environment, because tax is potentially, a big drag on sort of returns. So doing things sensibly with that. And then, not everybody is equipped with knowledge in those space and understands all the, dare I say, ways of investing. So thinking about financial services, part of where I see there's massive opportunities for those firms that are either have the expertise internally in terms of to be able to cater for those 3 areas, or they partner with other businesses to make sure that ultimately, clients are getting best advice that is covering all the things that perhaps they've thought about, but also, for the advisors to be able to make sure that they've prompted them around some of the things they've not actually thought of.
It's interesting. I was chatting to somebody recently, very similar sort of conversation, and they were saying some of the best meetings they have with clients at the moment are where the legal representative is there with the pensions advisor and perhaps even with an IFA, and they're having a conversation around, this is what we need to be thinking about. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about the other thing? I mean, it's a sector that has been for a long time considered a cottage industry, really, will writing. And I suppose as a result of the fact that there's still this very large unregulated element to the community. I mean, you make the point there about having the expertise to enable these conversations. That's going to be a really, really important part of the future, isn't it? And we know that regulated and unregulated are unhelpful words, but whether it's professionalization, whether it's standardization, whether it's skills, we've got to see an uplift in skills in this sector.
The whole goal that we have at CTT Group is always about trying to raise the bar in terms of standards. That's both in terms of obviously the knowledge we deliver through training to people, through to the tools, and then how we help them or their businesses grow. But it all starts with knowledge and understanding. And I think that is the key element. And I think I've always believed, back to the days when I was an advisor, that it was always about education. When you're sitting down with a client, they may know some aspects of what you're talking about, but they've come to you for advice. And your job is to advise, is to educate them. And through that education, you're delivering value. And then the more that they understand, the more that they will be aligned with the recommendations or the suggestions and proposals you're putting in front of them.
So what are organisations like CTT doing to harness the opportunity that's out there at the moment?
Well, there's a number of things. I suppose one, we have all those disciplines under one roof, and they say we don't market those to everybody, because we know we've got professional firms who come to us who have expertise in some of those areas, but not all of those areas. So part of it is making sure that advisors, companies can call upon our technical expertise, and we can help them deliver great outcomes for clients. If I just come back to that sort of the standards and advice. We've actually developed a simulator so that when consultants, advisors, when they've been on our training, they can test themselves in a safe environment. And this is an AI-generated client, but instantaneously they can, ask this client questions. The client will respond in certain ways, and it tests the consultant, advisor, to make sure they're pulling out all the necessary information they need, making sure then that the solutions they're suggesting are correct. And I think the other element of it, really, really important aspect, not necessarily on the technical side, is it also gives you feedback instantaneously on your softer skills. How did you introduce yourself to the client? How were you talking to them? The level that you were pitching the conversation around, using, as we do as an industry, sometimes technical jargon that might not be understood. And what better way than doing that in a safe environment where immediately, you can see whether you're getting things right and you can grow your confidence. In my historical days, that would require a supervisor or team leader or my boss to come out and observe me. Well, you had then two very expensive overheads, traveling to a client, just trying to make sure that obviously the level or the standard of advice and the way that we were managing that client was right. That's how I learned. But actually it wasn't the most effective way. And was I getting instantaneous feedback that was consistent? That would vary from person to person and how good those individuals were that came out with me. So raising the bar in terms of standards in the industry is a core part of what we're about. And it's one of the core pillars, knowledge. Is a key factor. But then it's the tools that, what are the tools that we can add alongside that to support people and help them, develop their journey as a consultant or as a business.
I was going to say, one of the things that technology does enable or bring is that ability to scale. And I think, again, it's a sector and it's an industry, and I described it as a cottage industry, and there are lots of historical reasons for that. But it's a sector that struggles to scale simply because the majority of its interactions have to be with people on a face-to-face basis, whether it's in person or now on video, for example.
I mean, look, I think the in-person piece is still really important. Don't get me wrong. The value associated with either educating a client or positioning sort of advice, helping them overcome sort of, challenges, hurdles, or that's really important. But I think in lots of industries, there's aspects of I dare say, an end-to-end process from early engagement through to solution that technology can provide. Dare I say, a great way of interacting with a client. People expecting work to be done quicker, faster. I'm sure if you spoke to lots of people in the industry, they would say the most enjoyable part as an advisor is sitting down with the client, talking to them, helping them through, the challenges or the things they're looking to solve. I'm not sure they love always the upfront piece or maybe the latter piece. And I think that's where technology can be a wonderful enabler. We've seen a number of businesses working with us who are changing the way that they're working. They have an open mind to it, thinking about, well, what's the information that I need to gather to be able to provide the best advice to a client? And are there other ways of being able to capture that information? Or more importantly, getting the client to capture that information for you in their own time. So, whether it's fact finding or whether it's, the fulfillment piece after you provide that advice, some of those bits, there's lots of technology out there that can enable the process to be a smoother one, one in which, dare I say, the client is in control of, giving you the information. We have a digital fact find at the beginning part of our process for people who want to use that. You soon know from a client if they're in a hurry to get something done, from the speed at which that fact find gets completed from maybe your initial engagement. And again, having spent lots of time sort of maybe engaging with clients in previous roles, I've sat in a house, whilst drinking tea, and the family have run around the house looking for information that we need, and sitting there for maybe 2 hours, having a lovely time, building rapport, wonderful. But is that the best use of my time? Actually, if you articulate to the client what is it you need and allow them to fill that in their own time, well, then actually you're using your time more efficiently. So I think some of the technology will enable, it requires people to have an open mind to maybe following a slightly different process, but arguably it can be more efficient. It can give the clients control of when they want to give you information. And what's more, if you're using your time efficiently and you've got all the information to be able to provide that great advice, well, commercially, the outcomes are likely to be somewhat better.
Commerciality is always a difficult topic because, of course, the outcome, the right outcome is the right outcome for the client, always. But at the end of the day, we're businesses, and we have to operate as such. And in fact, if you're regulated, the Solicitors Regulation Authority mandate that you have to be a solvent business. That's part of your regulatory responsibilities. And of course, outside of that, that's what most businesses want anyway. What evidence, though, is there, Andrew, that clients, you talked about, for example, the client that completes the fact find quickly is on a bit of a mission, whatever. But what evidence is there that clients are really engaged with this whole technology first approach? Have you got any measures of that or any sentiment around that?
Yeah, I have, because we're seeing some businesses looking to change their models for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it might be commercially, sometimes it might be from, they've got a new source of lead flow, but there's often a need to do things differently. And that can be, we want to make sure we deliver the most consistent client experience for every prospect that they actually meet. I had a coach years ago, and he coached me as an advisor, and he said to me, why should any of the people you meet not get the absolute best from you? And I said, well, I hope they do. And I said, okay, do you follow a process that's absolutely the same process for everybody? And I said, yeah, most of the time. Now, the reality is, successful and good advisors, we do get a little bit lazy at times, and we'll shortcut piece because we think we know better. We'll jump a step in the process. So for me, it all starts with, if you've got a brand new prospect, the starting point is get to know them. The next piece is explaining how you work if you think you can help. And part of that is setting out that process. I like looking at other industries. And a great one, we were talking about Clive earlier, and, I go and have a private medical, periodically, just to hopefully make sure I'm in the best nick I am. And in doing that, they set out a process. They said, Andrew, before you turn up, he said, we would like you to complete this questionnaire, fact find, as it is. It's digital. It gets sent to me. I'm motivated because I want to turn up to this meeting with them having all the information for them to give me the best advice, so that when I walk out of there, my plan for the next year is clear in terms of what I need to do. And you see this across other industries, whether it be somebody coming to your house to fit window, they'll explain how they work. They'll explain the cost associated with that. And, that's actually quite reassuring in lots of ways when somebody sets out, this is what you can expect, these are the junctions in terms of how we would work, and actually being transparent around, well, this is where there'll be a cost, or this is what that charge will be. So for me, it's all about, thinking about, your business and ensuring that your clients get a consistent journey and get explained, what that is at the outset, and then experience it as they go through that journey. So for me, that's where it really comes from. Now, it will vary business to business in terms of, the sort of clients that you're dealing with. But ultimately, the best process is the best process. And after a period of time of, dare I say, analysing data, you can then prove it with facts. And we're seeing that in the context of some of those people who are using our digital journey.
If we put the context around great wealth transfer, increased opportunity, greater opportunity for a wider gamut of services that people provide, I'm not going to put words into your mouth here, Andrew, but it feels as though there are going to be winners and losers over the course of the next 1, 5, 10 years. You're nodding along. You sort of sense this sector is going to change.
Like lots of other sectors have changed. I've watched it, investment management. It was a stockbroking cottage industry that has changed enormously over these years. So it's not specific just to this industry. There's lots of other ones that have fundamentally changed. And the winners and losers in this space are generally those that think continuing to doing what they're currently doing will service, the next generation of clients and everything else. Unfortunately, I think those will be the losers. Those who are prepared to experiment, innovate, and focus on, and this is about client outcomes, client journeys, great experiences. Those are the companies that I think are going to succeed.
And gazing into that crystal ball, what kind of timescales do you see this happening around? I mean, let me give you some thoughts of my own on that one. So listeners to the podcast may well be aware we have sister publications in conveyancing and family law. Conveyancing is going through its own modernization journey at the moment. Super interesting. That, for a lot of technology people and innovators, to them, they're saying it'll take 2 to 3 years. I think to a lot of the industry, they sort of feel it will take 10 years, just simply because these things are like turning the Titanic. Do you sort of feel as though it's probably the same here, that the innovators are saying, well, it's going to happen much more quickly, whereas the whole of the industry is perhaps a little bit more pragmatic?
The one constant we have here is change, right? And that will continue for years and years and years. So I can't see 10 years ahead. I can probably see 3 years ahead. And I think the speed of change is accelerating. You see it in other industries. I see it in the legal services industry. And that's absolutely the right thing to be happening. So for me, let's take AI, lots of different views on AI. I talked a bit about the simulator. We're using it in a number of different areas responsibly and making sure that, we're not letting it loose in the context of delivering sort of advice. But if you look at how AI has developed over the last 12 months, it's the pace of it has been enormous. The things it couldn't do but now can do is quite illuminating. So I think that's the backdrop. But it's not just about AI. There's change taking place, in many aspects, or there's many, dare I say, technology platforms that are growing. There's many ways of improving the quality of service and experience that clients can have. So to answer your question, the over the next 3 years, the pace of change is going to speed up, and part of the challenge for all companies, and nobody's got a perfect crystal ball to say, well, this is exactly what it's going to be, is to constantly keep innovating in a safe environment. Some things will be successful, some won't. So I was at an AI symposium only the other day, and one of the things that they were talking about were the number of projects that fail. And often those projects that fail are often that somebody's just throwing technology or AI at an industry and say, well, we could do this. The way that I think it will be successful, or technology will be successful, is look at the real problems or challenges or friction areas in your business, and then start with, well, could technology or AI help us in that space? So almost an AI approach first. Can it? Experiment in a small way. From those small ways, you suddenly go, if this has got legs, then you develop it out. So for me, it is about innovation, but it's also really, really looking at pain points or areas of business that you can really make a transformational difference for clients. And that's where I think, there are going to be some massive changes, over the course of, the next couple of years. And so we're using AI. I talked about the simulator. We're using it to check our code in the legacy software. We're experimenting in terms of, how it might read documents. And so, again, looking at some of the administrative tasks that, currently done maybe in a manual way by individuals. And, I'm a human being. I make mistakes on a regular basis. There are some things that technology can do probably better than me. In fact, there's probably quite a lot of things that it can do better than me.
I think one of the things that I find with AI, and looking at my own business and organization, is that art of the possible. To your point, what can AI do? And my tiny little brain doesn't always look at something and go, am I the right person that should be doing this? Is there another way that we can do it? Can AI solve this problem for me? And that's something that I've really been trying to talk to my own team internally about. I mean, clearly organizations like yourself that have got the ability to invest in that is a benefit to you, but more broadly, I know that, for example, you share that investment and that energy with the industry as well, and that innovation with the industry as well.
Yeah, but it's also a cultural thing. It's not. We in fact did last week a training session with the team leaders, the leaders in the business, and encouraging them to share either some of the problems or some of the ideas they've had in terms of where AI could be utilized, or maybe we could help them in terms of solving pain points. And that's a cultural piece, because they then are not afraid to think about doing things differently. And I referred to it a little bit earlier. If you have an open mind and you're prepared to ask curious questions, you're prepared to talk to other people, other industries, the answer isn't that far away. But it does require you to be curious, and it does require you to experiment a little bit. And again, importantly, not every experiment will work. That doesn't mean you failed. We learn more in life from the things we probably failed at than the things that actually worked. It's probably a good example also, David, of companies come to us for all sorts of things. They might come because of our training, other knowledge we can provide to them. It might be because of our software, the tools that we have, and sometimes they've just got a problem. And actually, that's a really enjoyable part of the business. We're a consultancy as well, so we'll listen to the problems that they've got. We've dealt with and deal with lots of different businesses with very different backgrounds, and so helping people overcome problems, particularly in the private client space, we've probably seen most situations, or most of the most common situations. And, from my perspective, having originally worked in a B2C environment advising clients, working B2B is equally rewarding, if not even more so, because when somebody's got a problem and I maybe help them solve it, and that might be CTT Group, we can solve it for them. It might not be. It might be I just put them in touch with somebody who I know has had a similar problem. That's really rewarding, particularly when you start to see their businesses grow. And they recognise the important partnership that we've have with them in terms of making sure that their businesses are successful.
I suppose if we all had that almanac from the Back to the Future films, we'd all be millionaires, wouldn't we? If we're thinking about what 2026 looks like. But I think you've given a really interesting picture of what the next few years might look like, and to your point that change is absolutely the constant, then I absolutely agree. And of course, AI, we finished the discussion on AI today is the worst, is the poorest, is the least malleable it will ever be, and the rate and speed of its improvement is that hockey stick, isn't it? It's that massive curve upwards, and I think we're probably still relatively close to the bottom of that. So we've got a huge amount to learn over the course of the next couple of years. Andrew, it's been great to have you on the podcast, and super interesting to share your thoughts and insight. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, David. Enjoyed chatting.